Cindy McLeish, Shadow Minister for Sport and Tourism. Thanks for joining us on Flow today.
Pleasure, Ricky.
And now the news is still, I think everyone's just getting used to the idea that there's not going to be a MotoGP or a Grand Prix in Victoria this year.
Absolutely, and what major body blows they are to both Victoria, Melbourne and Phillip Island. You know, we missed out on the GP last year and the MotoGP. And, you know, I think when people are looking for a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of big events, when we've had so many cancellations and postponements, particularly in Victoria, that, this could have been the light at the end of the tunnel. But it's clear that the government doesn't have confidence in their systems to allow this to go ahead.
I was trying to get to the bottom of what the Chief Health Officer's advice was. Acting Officer, I think O'Brien, had indicated that it wasn't necessarily their advice to the government that this event should be cancelled. They were advising on how to stage the event. So whose call has it been? Has it been a captain's call?
Look, it's hard to know exactly whose call it is because it could well be a captain's call. I know the Grand Prix organisation, Andrew Westacott, would have been doing everything that he could have been doing. And at the end of the day, he said that they couldn't satisfy the requirements, coming into the requirements of Australia and what we wanted in Victoria. And I think that, we've clearly had problems with hotel quarantine. But, these guys have been in a bubble all around the world and they've all vaccinated. And it's not just the drivers, it's their teams. They've all got a bit of an entourage with them to make it all happen. So they've got that, the vaccinations, the bubbles that they've been living in, and you would have thought we would be able to do some sort of bubble for them with rapid testing. The rapid testing is where you can get a 15-minute turnaround at a very good indication on a COVID test. They're doing it if you haven't got a vaccination to get into Wimbledon. They'll do, at the gate. They're doing it at the G7 when all the world leaders met the other day. They had constant COVID tests through the rapid testing technique. There are things that I think we could have done, and I'm not sure that the government really had a plan about what the way forward was here.
Well, after last year's fiasco where fans had turned up the morning of the race and then they cancelled it, what has this decision to yesterday meant for the confidence about Melbourne as an events capital of the nation and Victoria as a destination for major events?
Look, it absolutely puts that up in the air. And, we've lost the world's most livable city. We're down to number 8 now, which is, we held that mantle for so long, so that's a real drop. But, we didn't have the grand final last year. The tennis next year, I wonder what that's going to look like. We've got the Avalon Air Show. I wonder what that's going to look like. The minister's already indicated that the racing carnival is not going to look the same without internationals and things like that. So it looks as though they haven't even got a plan for November. And the Accommodation Association were telling me that it takes them 3 months to recover from a lockdown. And so, we're talking about September, October for Melbourne coming out of lockdown for what we've had. And, these are the sorts of things that really kick it back to life. And so it's extremely disappointing that the government just didn't have the plan really in place to make sure that they could host this event.
Your colleague in the coalition, Peter Walsh, flagged that there might be a risk that the South Australian Premier would be licking his lips at the chance of pinching the Grand Prix back. Do you think that's a serious prospect?
Look, I think there'll be not just other states in Australia licking their lips trying to work out how to get the Grand Prix because it is such a big economic driver. And other countries like saying, maybe we can steal that off Australia. And, we've absolutely got to buckle down and make sure that we don't lose any more of these events. And I do fear for tennis early next year.
Yeah, it's not carved in stone that Australia must have a MotoGP or a Grand Prix. They could go to somewhere else in Asia or anywhere else in the world possibly.
And we've got contracts till 2025 and 2026 for the MotoGP 2026. But yeah, other people will always be eyeing off these big events because it's not just the hospitality and the accommodation that those sectors that benefit, but you've got all these suppliers that supply, the floors. If you've got sponsors and things like that they've got their own little areas that's decked out and they might have their own audio-visual stuff. And there are people who provide all of that in the events industry, and they've been hit for a six as well over the last 18 months. People that provide the chairs and the tables and all of that sort of stuff. There's so many jobs tied up really in having the Grand Prix and the MotoGP, and it's just such a blow for Victoria that we've lost this.
Well, the Premier seemed to be indicating in his comments too that this might fall at the feet of others, the responsibility for it. He was saying that the cap on arrivals into Australia decided at National Cabinet, and the slow vaccination rate, they were his excuses. It seems it's everyone else's fault except the government's.
Look, and I don't think vaccinations are all of it, because whilst our vaccinations aren't as speedy as we'd like, other states had events last year when there were no vaccinations. Other countries had events last year when, no one was on the path for vaccination. And the Premier was one of the key drivers to try and stop the intake of overseas arrivals. Can't have it both ways.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Cindy McLeish, thanks for joining us on Flow to talk
Pleasure,
about
Rikki.
this, and we'll catch you again soon. Thanks.
You will. No worries. Bye.